Hello and welcome to the Hands Up If You're Human podcast, an ongoing series of conversations dedicated to exploring the messy reality of being human. The truth is, there is nothing we can think, say, do, feel, or experience that isn't 100% human. So it's time to drop the guilt and the shame, embrace everything that we are, and start to create a life we really want to live. My name is Wyndham. I am the Blueprint Coach, and I am delighted today to be joined by a friend of mine who has been branded content strategist at Jamie Oliver, co-founder of Delightful Media and founder of Tipple, both creative production studios for the drinks industry. He's an executive producer at Saturday Studios, all before a Scotch egg triggered a breakdown and direction change. He is now the Thought PT, a coach, and a deliberate dad. It is my great pleasure to welcome to the podcast Steve Cardwell. How are you, Steve?
What an intro. I'm gonna cut that out and put that in the front of my videos.
Yeah, do. You're more than welcome.
Yeah, no, I'm good, mate. I'm good. I'm glad we finally got this time in because I've been elusive with my 5-month-old sleep. So I'm glad we finally nailed this time. But yeah, thanks for the intro. Interestingly, we were talking just before we came on here about recognizing the things that you've done and actually hearing those things out loud. Sometimes you go, all right, actually, I have been at this. I have tried. I've been working hard all these years to try and make this work. So yeah, no, it's really interesting to hear that. So thank
Yeah,
you.
it's a fascinating one, isn't it? Because we're so conditioned into looking forward and seeing the peak that we're trying to scale and how
Mm,
far away that looks that we almost always forget to look back and see how far we've come.
exactly. And like interestingly, I'm in a new room today because we're swapping our rooms around for the kids. And I'm actually working in the line. So I was clearing out some, old books and pieces of paper, and I came across like an envelope of just random A4 sheets that I'd written from like 4 or 5 years ago. And it was sort of very relevant for what we were going to talk about today. The
Yeah,
things that I wanted to experience, the things that I wasn't enjoying in my life. And again, looking back on them is actually really good sort of
mm,
reflection piece because you're totally right. Like we're always, what's next? How can we move forward? But actually, recognizing how far we've come is a really important, trait of being
yeah,
human and acknowledging ourselves, right, for the efforts and actions that we've taken.
absolutely. 100% agree. So, quick question.
Mhm.
What's missing from that list?
What's missing from that list? As in your question list or my list?
The my intro to you. So
Oh,
the
what's missing? Um, what is missing? My immediate response to that is probably the detail, right? The trials, the tribulations, the
yeah,
actions, the efforts behind everything, the journey that has got me to where I am to where I am today. And as you said, like triggered by a triggered by a Scotch egg. But I think probably that's another interesting point. Sometimes we headline things without necessarily, looking into the detail or digging into the nuance. And our
yeah,
mind is quite the black and white decision maker, right? It's quite
yeah,
binary. Whereas
yeah.
actually when we get into, the detail of things aren't necessarily as black and white as they seem, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. Everyone I've spoken to and asked that question of really falls into two camps. They've either rejected the labels and said they're just labels, they don't actually say anything about who I am,
Mm.
or they've said, no, those are good labels, or they've said, oh, there's a couple you've missed, there's a couple of labels you've missed. You're the first person who has said there's a whole load of stuff beneath each and every one of those
Mm.
that feels more important than the label itself.
Yeah, yeah, and I think as well, lots of the. I actually only realized this the other day when I was chatting to someone again. The theme of acknowledging things that you've done in your past has gone. Oh yeah, no, I've only actually ever had 2 jobs, so I've been, in this sort of entrepreneurial business owner journey for a long time now, like 8 or 9 years. So I think for me, each of those titles and each of those labels take me back to a real significant like point in my life, and at the end of each of them, there was probably like quite a big shift,
Yeah.
for me, because I think, leaving my first job when I moved to London, which was a whole massive experience in itself, which, come from a small town in Northern Ireland into a giant advertising agency. It's just a whole different world. And then, leaving that was quite a significant thing. Working for Jimmy Oliver, where I obviously met your lovely wife, was another big shift there. And then as a result of that, I met some people that I started my first business with.
Mm.
Right? And then that came a category of a few different businesses back to back. And for anyone that started their own business, they know that there's a lot of trials and tribulations and hardships.
Yeah.
And with the ending of each of those, there was a big moment for all of them, to be honest.
Mm.
Which then, yeah, it really, now I'm thinking about it and all of those labels, it sort of like zooms me back to
Yeah.
one or two real vivid memories
Mm.
and almost like pivotal moments, almost, right? Like sliding door moments in your
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. There's that kind of inflection point in all of those little direction changes in life that certainly for me, I don't think I don't think I can't speak for anybody else. I didn't recognize the importance of that inflection point at the time. And it is only from a distance past them that I can look back and go, oh my God, that one conversation, that one person, that one moment completely changed my direction. And then you find another one again, and actually, oh, that changed it again. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting and powerful sort of practice to reflect and acknowledge because
Yeah,
we're not very good
totally.
at it.
No, we're not. We're not. And I think that's like one of the reasons why I got into coaching as well, right? Like sort of you saying there around one conversation or one line or just something
Mm,
that triggers some kind of like almost visceral reaction from you when you look back in hindsight had such a profound impact.
yeah,
And I think I find that, with me being coached or with certain clients that I work with, they say, "Oh, you said this," or I think of a line that I've heard from my coach that seems
yeah,
insignificant to them, right? It's just
yeah,
a one liner in a 60-minute conversation or a one liner in a 6-month
yeah,
agreement. But that's the thing that helps them, right? And I think
yeah,
that's the importance of like having someone else to help you reflect and be self-aware and help you look in potentially areas or look at things in ways that you are unable to do so yourself, right?
yeah,
In the short term.
yeah. It's almost like I think with coaching there is a risk that the way it is sometimes spoken about, it's almost like a promise of these monumental breakthroughs. And I have never had a single moment monumental breakthrough. I've had small incremental things that come together that you sit back and you go, oh my God, all of those things together. There's like a moment where all the tiles just jolt slightly and they create the picture. But it's as a result of all the steps you've taken
Mm.
rather than, oh my God, I've had this insight and I've healed in the moment. And I think it's like so much in life, our expectations of what we're going to get are skewed massively away from process and to outcome, whereas actually the benefit is in the process, as you say.
Mm. And like, there's a real nice phrase that I can't remember where I heard this from, but like, you can't skip your own evolution.
Mm,
So, like, that idea that, that when you said it was sort of an incremental thing, and then at one point something landed with you, but it's through that wouldn't have landed to you if you hadn't have actually experienced and taken all the actions beforehand, right?
absolutely.
So it's like
Yeah.
you have to evolve, and
Yeah.
then there will be a point something will
Yes.
make you take the action, but it wouldn't happen otherwise.
Yeah,
And I think
exactly.
I sort of think about a couple of things, that I maybe like a book that I've read maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago I think it was about Buddhism, probably, right? And some of it, or a podcast I've listened to. I remember listening to one with Johnny Wilkinson on like high performance podcast.
Such a great podcast. That those episodes, particularly with him, are
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah. But I think I probably listened to it first, probably not at the right, like not at the right point of my evolution. I
Yeah,
read that book not at the right point of my evolution. And then a few years later, I listened to it again and I sort of got it a lot more, right?
yeah,
Because I'd evolved and I'd done the
absolutely.
work. So I think sometimes it's like you need to be aware of where you are in your journey for things to land with you appropriately.
Yeah. Re-listened to that conversation he had with the first conversation he had with the High Performance Podcast at least once a year.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
every time I listen to it, I've evolved further than I was when I listened to it last time, and I get something more from it. Completely agree with you. Yeah. It's because of that, it's so important that we don't. I think there's a risk at the moment where we're almost challenged to buy in 100% to everything somebody tells us, or opt out 100%. And we miss out on so much potential learning. So I work with everybody about bridging to 10%. It's like there's a lesson in absolutely anything and everything if we choose to look for it. But that will require us to free ourselves from this burden of, oh, well, I have to believe everything or reject everything. And actually, I can just go, if I can take one sentence from this person, it's been 100% a worthwhile conversation. And I can start building my own little patchwork of what works for me rather than adopting somebody else's approach.
Mm. No, I totally agree. I listened to I can't remember who the conversation was. It was Chris Williams in Modern Wisdom, but like talking about yeah, wholesale taking on people's opinions and beliefs. But then you go, is that actually you then, right? You know,
Mm,
his example was uh if you're a Trump supporter and you support guns and don't want abortions and have all these wholesale beliefs of what outsiders would believe is a this caricature of this specific American. Do you actually believe all of them, or are you just picking one person and taking everything on wholesale? Like you've thought
yeah.
about? Have you actually thought about those individual issues? Have you thought about what you actually think? And
Mm,
you can agree with some parts of people, like exactly what you said. You can agree with some opinions,
yeah.
and you can disagree with all the other stuff, right? You
Yeah.
know, I am not sitting here a Trump supporter in any way, but it's sort of what you said. If you can take 10%, like one thing I was thinking of the other day, I was like, he says what he's gonna do, he does what he says he's gonna do, right?
Yeah.
I don't agree with anything that he's doing,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but like that one part of like, well, he's doing the stuff, and you look at people what they complain about. Not this is a politics thing. I don't really care too much about politics, but generally people's opinions on politicians are they don't do anything right.
Yeah.
Whereas actually, he says he's done something. 1% of that, right,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
relatively useful. Like sort of like what you said.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. So it's not the content of what he does. It's actually the fact that he does what he says, and that changes on a minute by minute basis, which is not helpful. But the thing we can take is, well, actually do what you say. And in order to do that and not be inconsistent and not be such uh, a challenging person in the world, be clear on what it is you want out of stuff. Be clear on what it is you really want, and then do what you say you're going to do.
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
completely agree.
I did not think I was going to bring up Trump in this
No,
conversation.
well
I don't
done.
know where that's
You're the
come from.
first person who's gone there. Yeah, well done. But it's been hectic the last few weeks, right? So, okay, so this season is about finding your freedom. So, first question for you. What does finding your freedom mean to you?
I've taken a few days to ruminate on this because I know you sent me the stuff across last week. And I think finding your freedom for me is it's almost like a feeling, right? Like a lightness, uh, a comfort that the path that I'm on in life or the path that you're on in life is one that you've chosen. And although you may not be exactly where you want to be in your life, right? Like the external circumstances or even internal, you're comfortable on the trajectory that you're on.
And when you say comfortable, is that accepting
Hmm.
or because I just want to be clear on whether it's like
Yeah,
a
of course.
comfort zone
Yeah.
or whether it's actually I'm accepting of where I am because I'm being intentional about it.
Yeah, accepting is probably a better word rather than comfortable. Like accepting where I am on that pathway, knowing that I will, keep moving forward. I will take those actions. I will do what I said I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
And, what I want from an external, internal perspective, like I will get that if I keep moving forward on this path. I think a lot of it is like finding freedom is freedom from your own expectations, your own internal dialogue, your that voice on your shoulder telling you this is what you should be doing. So I think
Mm.
for me it's like that feeling of I think I do want to use the word comfort because it's almost like contentment, right? Like a little bit of
Mm.
contentment that you're on the right path because I think like ultimately, there's that idea that I truly believe in is like there's nowhere really to get to, right? Like there's going to be somewhere else to go. There's going to be some other thing to get, some other action to take. So I think like what I've found for me is like comfort of having a plan and being on a pathway and being intentional and deliberate with the choices and actions that you're taking like create a comfort for me. So like sort
Mm.
of what we talked about the scenario that I'm in with my life at the moment is chaotic because I've got like two young children and the way it's sort of structured and set up at the moment, like is it perfect by any means? No, right? Like my time's dragged everywhere. But do I feel comfortable that and accepting that I'm doing everything that I said I'm going to do the best that I can and I'm on the pathway that to live a deliberate life. I like to articulate it as yes, right? And I think that is definitely a sense of freedom, of liberation, of contentment for me.
Yeah. I love the word contentment. I've so many people I've spoken to, they'll mention it and then they'll immediately step away from it
Mm,
as if, oh no, it's a bad thing to be content. And it's like, surely it's the ultimate to be content, isn't it? Because then you're no longer grasping for things. You're no longer looking at externally for more of something. You're, like you say, you're in an intentional, deliberate life. You're doing what you say you're going to do. And what comes to mind when you're speaking there is this kind of, for me, is this idea of there's a big picture.
mm,
This is the life I'm trying to create, and a complete acceptance and comfort in the fact that the day-to-day mechanics required to create it are sometimes going to be really bloody difficult and really uncomfortable and a big challenge. And if you preempt those and kind of pre-prime yourself for, hey, guess what? This is going to be difficult, and you remain deliberate and intentional, then the path through it is much less hard than it would otherwise be.
totally. I like the analogy of mountain biking through the forest, right? So like you purposefully choose the path, the trail that you're on so you can see it in front of you, but what you can't see is around that corner. You can't see going through those trees. What you can't see is over the hill.
Mm.
But you pedal hard, right? Because you know that if you keep going through this tricky bit, round that bend, over that hill, like this is the pathway that you've deliberately chosen. You will knock off those points that you want to, right? I
Yeah.
really like that sort of analogy. So it's like trusting yourself on the actions that you're taking now that may not seem like they ladder up, with the life that you want to live, but trusting that they do, right? And taking the actions and being consistent regardless of what you're sort of feeling in the moment.
Yeah. Okay, so how long has that been a focus, and not just a focus, but a reality of your life? Trust, deliberateness, intentionality.
Mm. I think like sort of what you said earlier around the not recognizing these turns until a couple of years later or looking back in hindsight, right? So I probably could go all those job titles and businesses that you talked about, like
Yeah.
all of that is not. I like this idea of when I'm talking with my coaching and stuff as well, the idea between like a default and a deliberate life.
Hmm.
So your deliberate life is you have to take some time to reflect, go like, am I going to where I want to go, and taking the actions to get there. The default one is absorbing societal expectations, the things that you should be doing, just taking that promotion because it's a 5 grand pay rise. It's, buying this house in this area because that's what your mates are doing.
Yeah.
It's all of that. So, like, if I look back from a work perspective anyway, I probably have been quite intentional and deliberate, right? Like, I
Mm.
have made moves and that wouldn't necessarily be the default path, but I probably have only recognized that, relatively recently, like a
Yeah.
year or two, or I had probably all of these ideas in my mind, but hadn't quite like been able to articulate it
Yeah.
as succinctly as having that mountain bike analogy
Yeah.
or deliberate versus default. So yeah, I think the the Scotch egg point, right? Like he talked about, which
I
was
was
sort
gonna
of
come
like
to that. Yeah.
five years ago or something now. It was
Okay.
on my birthday when I was in 2019. Like I'd made some obviously intentional moves with my businesses, like I talked about, but it sort of got to a point where I did feel a bit trapped, right? I did feel
Mm.
like I was doing a little bit of the default moves, even though it was within my own business. I had this probably aspiration and expectation about working for myself, and it wasn't quite laddering up
Yeah.
with the reality that was going on. I was sort of building a business in a way that I suppose I thought a business should be built rather than in a way that I wanted to build a business and experience
Yeah.
my life. So I was basically, working in an area that I didn't particularly enjoy. The constraints of I'd hired a couple of employees at the time, so I needed to go into the office and I didn't have the financial security. So I sort of a bit like, what the hell am I doing with my life? And sort of got to a point where I was stressed. I'm sure people recognize this, but like stressed and then gone, but I don't really care about this. But I was stressed about being
Yeah.
stressed.
Yeah.
So you obviously do care in some way. I don't really
Yeah.
care about this thing, but I did. And I think a lot of pressures around not enjoying my everyday. Plus, also, I had like, this is, 5 or 6 years ago now, had this idea in my mind that, if I was 45, say, I was like 30 at the time or 32, it felt like the worst thing in the world to be doing the same thing that I was doing then,
Mm.
right? Like I had that real thought in my mind.
Yeah.
And I think before my thought process, which is like one I'm sure a lot of people recognize, but now I recognize this as sort of like default thinking is, oh, it'll just work out itself, right? Something will come up,
Yeah.
something will happen. There will be some kind of move where, I'll fall into something.
Yeah.
But at that point, I had a bit of it was a birthday breakfast. My wife brought out this beautiful birthday breakfast and I just started crying. I didn't really know what it was, but it was some kind of like emotional release
Mm.
at that point. And I think like I recognized then that, and I went, like, I don't know whether I want to wait for something to turn up, right?
Yeah.
I don't know whether this will actually happen if I'm not happy with my day to day, nor I'm happy with the pathway that I'm on.
Yeah.
I need to take responsibility for my life and do something about it. And that was sort of I'd say probably that's the main trigger for building that more deliberate life, that more intentional life.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's that whole idea of, you can look back and you've started your own businesses and you've been intentional and deliberate in that sense, and yet there's still this default. Well, I was building a business how other people build businesses, and or it sounds like there was a disconnect between actually what do you really want and what are you actually doing, and then to have the recognition and the realization that actually nobody's going to do this for me. They're just not. So that whole, I was very, so I completely different pathways, but that whole kind of, at some point something will happen that will turn this around, and it doesn't. It just doesn't.
Mm.
And it is that kind of having to take responsibility and ownership of your own life. And I, you as a coach, what's your take on, do we have to bottom out before we make big change?
Mm. I was actually thinking about that as you were talking there. I like to think you don't have to, right? I like to think you don't have
Don't
to.
have to get so desperate before.
Exactly. Like I like to think that because I suppose the way I like to think about this as well, and the way I work with people now is like creating this deliberate life. It's much easier to create the life that you want and much easier to make big moves and take actions that you haven't taken before when you're at a place of contentment,
Mm.
right? Like when you don't need the painkillers,
Yeah.
right? Like when you're there, and that's how I feel now, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm taking lots of big actions. I'm still pushing on. I'm ambitious. I have that paradox of like, contentment plus also ambition at the same time,
Yeah.
which I think people don't think that you can have, but I really do think you can 100% have. But I do. I suppose the data would suggest that most people don't actually reach out for that external help until they do need the painkiller, right? Like they do need
Yeah.
some help to release themselves from that pain. And I was very similar, right?
Yeah.
Like, and the vast majority of people that come to me are very similar.
Yeah. Likewise.
And they like, and I suppose it's relative, right? It is relative. So, my pain was not enjoying the business that I'm running, right? In a flat in London that we owned.
Mm.
Or like had a mortgage, not owned, but you know what I mean, had a
Yeah.
mortgage on. And again, people that come to me as well, it's relative. Their lives are probably 7 out of 10. They wanted to get it to 8 and 9 out of 10, but there's some kind of like acute pain
Yeah.
that's stopping them living that deliberate life. And usually, like the guys that come to me now, it's like, time, overwhelm, all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's interesting. I like the idea that you don't need the pain, but I think the data suggests that people do need the pain.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And it is a fascinating one. I don't know whether there can be a shift over time, because I agree with you completely that, you know, it is much easier to make a bold step when you're at a place of contentment or uh I guess confidence. But as you and I both know, confidence doesn't come before action. Confidence is the result of action. Um, and I guess I mean my sense of it is that we're just incredibly resilient as a species. And so we can put up with a lot of rubbish. We can put up with an awful lot of stress and pressure. And when we're surrounded, like you said, are you buying the house in that area because that's where your mates have gone and bought houses? And are you driving the car that you're driving because actually your mates are all into whatever it might be? Um, we can put up with a lot of shit to maintain our place in our tribes. I refer to them as inclusion criteria, the compromises to ourselves that we make in order to be accepted by the groups we are
Yeah.
in. What's the word I'm looking for? we are part of. But it might not be true to who we really are. And so that kind of, but that dissonance, I don't think is easy to identify early. I think that it is the internal juddering that happens and the tears over a Scotch egg or the for me it was I came home there was a big issue seller on I used to work up in Bishopsgate and there was a big issue seller um and he had a dog and I was chatting to him one day on the way home and he was going to have to give the dog up because he couldn't afford it and it all came together when I got home. Louisa asked me how I was and just burst into tears and it was just this here's me doing this thing being miserable. Here's this, and I don't know why the two things conflated to come together, but they did. Um, yeah, it's an interesting one. So with your
Like, oh, sorry, I was
no
just
no
gonna
no
one tiny last point in that, if that's cool.
yeah
It just made me think of, we were talking before about like gym analogies. So one of the things I like to use all the time is
the
telling
thought
people
PT right
exactly telling people to recognize their reps,
hmm
right? You have to recognize your reps to build the mental muscle in whatever area or aspect that you're working on. And maybe without the external help, you don't recognize the reps as much, right? So
yeah
therefore, you don't necessarily have like so you said about confidence comes from action, right? Confidence comes from competence. Competence comes from taking lots of
repetition
action, repetition, right? Doing reps. If you don't recognize the reps that you've taken, then you may not realize that you have the confidence or competence to do something. Whereas, like, when people come and work with a coach, that's one of the things that they help them do, right? Have that self awareness, recognize the actions that they've taken. So even if they're in pain to begin with, they get to a level playing field generally quite quickly,
yeah
right? So then they can make the bigger moves. So yeah, maybe it's a case of like helping people recognize their actions that they've taken, acknowledge themselves a little bit more. It almost
yeah
makes me think of like, the results that you would get going to an actual gym, right? Like if you
mm,
just go yourself with no real plan, sort of
yeah
like just go in and lift weights, eat okay, but no real actual, not diet
yeah
plan, but like structured plan for what you're actually trying to achieve versus if you're, say, wanting to lose weight and you're a little bit overweight and you work with a PT for a period of time and you get to that initial goal relatively quickly and then you create new goals, right? And actually, probably you get better results over the same amount of time, even
yeah
from a lower baseline than the
yeah
person who didn't, have that help, have that plan, have that didn't recognize the reps that they were putting in.
yeah that's really interesting because that is also tailored versus non-tailored. It's
Mm.
like going to the gym and kind of going, oh, that person is doing this exercise, so I'm going to do that. But that person might intentionally be building shoulders, for example,
Yeah.
or, on a squat rack building quads. You don't know that they're a cyclist and actually they're looking to increase their watts, whatever it might be. Which, because I always talk about mechanism versus meaning. And everything we do is simply a mechanism in service to a deeper meaning. So your intentionality, your deliberateness is all focused on creating meaning. Can you share the meaning you're trying to create? Because you've trained as a coach and you now help other people, men, be deliberate dads by freeing up time in their prime time in their diaries or in their weeks. That's the mechanism for you. What's the meaning it's in service to for you? And I know I'm springing this on you. I
Oh
pre-warned you
no,
of other
it's fine.
questions, but this is just coming because I think it's really interesting.
I suppose like the that concept of a deliberate dad is something that I want to live, right?
Mm,
So I suppose like one of the things that I experienced when I was running my other businesses is there's this idea that this hustle bro culture, all of this jazz where you have to put in 100 hours a week and you need
Yeah.
to sacrifice your health and you need to do all these lots of things, burn everything else to the ground apart from your business for your business to be a success.
Yeah.
Right. So like my concept of a deliberate dad is you're able to, succeed in your career or build your business. Most people who work with me are business owners, right? Build your
Hmm.
business in a way that is successful to you and also doesn't sacrifice any of the other parts of your life that are ultimately more important, right?
Yeah.
So when you're a dad, your kids, 100%, right? Like if you ask anyone, they'd be like, "Oh, what's the most important thing in your life when you're a dad?" They go, "Their kids." But
Mm.
yet the actions that you take would not necessarily suggest that a lot of the time, right?
Yeah.
So this idea of a deliberate dad is my experiment of building a life where I build a business that I really enjoy, is successful from a internal perspective. Like I enjoy doing it, my version
Yeah.
of success, plus also brings in money, right? Plus also
Yeah.
brings in the revenue for me to live the lifestyle that I want, but also, spend lots of quality time with my children, spend time looking after my mental and physical health, be in the best physical condition that I've ever been in, which I am at the moment.
I saw the
Um,
video. Looking good, mate.
which I am. Spend time, with your wife or your partner, spend time with Jess, like quality time, really deliberate, intentional time. Plus, also be the one who like have time for myself, right? Whether I, want to hang in a coffee shop and read a book on my own or go to a spa with some friends or, hang out with my mates and be the one that organizes the beer. Whereas
Yeah.
there's this like misconception or it seems like you can't do all of those things. Like that's the idea, and it's especially when you become a dad. Like I felt like I had no time before, and I definitely have considerably less time now, right? So like
Mm.
that idea of overwhelming spinning plates and all. So I think the meaning for me is becoming that person, right? Like having this, it's almost like a aspirational identity,
Yeah.
like becoming this person and ultimately living the life that I believe I can live.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that I'm saying this out loud, when I said earlier about finding your freedom, feeling comfortable if you're on that path. It sounds relatively morbid, right? Like, but if I died tomorrow,
Mm.
I like Stoic philosophy a lot, right? So
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
memento mori and remember you will die. So
Yeah.
I don't necessarily reflect on this all the time, but like if I died tomorrow, I'd be sad, right? Like for my children and everything else. But like I know that I'm on that pathway,
Mm.
right? Everything's not 100% in balance right now, but I'm trying to build my business in a certain way. I'm not sacrificing the time with my kids,
Yeah.
right? I'm working on myself. I'm making sure that I'm having conversations with my wife all the time. I've
Mm.
got dates in my diary to see my friends. So, like, what will change if I move down the path? I'll probably have a bit more money, right? So, like, the pressure of the building your own business, as you know, will be slightly lessened.
Yeah.
So, therefore, if like that freedom will, it's almost like just the bank balance will change, right? So that'll
Yeah.
unlock a little bit. But I'm comfortable that I'm on that pathway. Does that answer your
Yeah.
question?
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. It's that whole kind of, I've written down tending to all areas of life. It's because they're all, but the fact that you've had the moment of whether it was a moment or probably a number of moments that come together that to have this kind of actually, no, all of these things are really important. And I think we're bombarded by messaging where work, hustle, grind, bro culture, whatever it might be, can very easily push us down this route where we're hyper focused on being productive or being busy. And when we do that, all those other parts of our lives that are more important, ultimately, if we're at our life reflection, end of life reflection, and actually having the recognition at this stage in your life to go, actually, no, 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 I want to be deliberate in how I approach my life. And And of course, this whole balance piece is, well, I've only got so much time and so much energy. So if I want to spend real quality time with my family, that's time I'm not spending on my business or in my business. So the results are going to reflect that. So what I'm hearing from you is that actually your definition of success has to touch every one of those areas. And there will be times when your energy is more focused in one area than in the others, and there'll be a reduction in those, but never an exclusion of them.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I think that's a really pertinent point you made there. I wrote in, a couple of my posts. I really like this idea of seasons. I'm recognizing the external factors that are happening, right,
Mm,
that are out of your control, plus also purposefully choosing what to put your energy on for a certain
mm,
season. So,
yeah,
like a very easy one is to use quarters, right? Like it can marry up with the actual season. So, one of the things that I've started doing and do with my clients as well, I came up with this concept called like the clarity cap. It's almost like a salary cap. So,
yeah,
when you play fantasy football, you've got a certain amount of money you have to spend, like a
yeah,
100 million quid. But you want Haaland in there, you want Saka,
yeah,
you want a great goalkeeper, you want that right back, but you've got to choose, right? Because you can't
yeah,
fit everyone in there. You've only got a certain amount of salary. And like my idea is, you've got a certain amount of points to spend in a quarter across those four main parts: your work, family, relationships, and health.
yeah,
And you have to spend some to maintain them. So
yeah,
exactly what you said, right? Like you've got to spend a certain amount to maintain them. And that's fine, right? But you have to do that if you want that to. You don't want to spend all your money in Haaland, and then you've got two defenders,
yeah,
right? Like you have to make that team balanced for that particular part of the season. And the same with this. Like if you put all your eggs into work and there isn't enough to maintain, you just let everything else sort of fill in the gaps, then yeah, your health is going to suffer, your relationships are going to suffer, your relationship with your kids are going to suffer. And if you keep doing that year on year on year, you get 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, and you wonder why you don't have that relationship with your kids
mm,
or your wife hates you,
yeah.
right?
What
So
did
I
you
think
hear?
like being second.
I said, what did you hear? No, I'm joking.
But like that idea, like now going like this is the time, effort, energy that you need to maintain these areas. And some, for a quarter, some it might be work, right? Like you might spend more
Yeah,
time in work than hanging out with your friends, and that's
mm,
cool, right? Or you might just maintain, you might have gone like I talked about with a PT before, right? You might focus on your health for a quarter, hire a PT, work really hard. But actually, one of the interesting things about this is like when you put emphasis on a certain area for a period of time, I like a quarter, right? Because it's enough time to get results,
yeah,
to get data, to run an experiment, but not too long to not change it, right? Like if it's not
yeah,
working, if you're not getting results. But actually, if you work with a PT for a certain period of time for 3 months and you got some results, your base level is higher, right, to
yeah,
begin with. So then your maintenance doesn't actually take as much effort and energy
yeah,
as it did a quarter before. So actually, you can lift and maintain, and you get results over a year across all aspects of your life,
yeah,
even if you're changing the emphasis
yeah, yeah,
on one you're putting towards. So, but it's being really, like you said earlier about expectations, it's been really deliberate with the expectations that you have on yourself
yeah,
in all of those areas.
yeah. And
So I'm
recognizing when you've
recognizing,
moved into a different season, you're going, actually, I'm, for example, I don't feel quite as fit as I used to. Having the awareness to sit there and go, okay, but what phase am I in? What season am I in? What period am I in? Okay, I'm in a period where I've been really focused on building the business because all the reasons you do that. And therefore the time I've spent on my fitness has dropped. So of course my fitness has dropped. That's okay, as long as you understand why you're pouring your time into the business over your health or relationships or something else. And you were saying it's that idea of, you need to focus on these areas to make them improve. But you also use the really important word, which is if. if you want balance in your life, you need to pay attention to every area in your life. If you don't want balance in your life, you don't need to do anything. Carry on doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
But don't be surprised if you're pouring all your time into work. Don't be surprised when your health falters, when your relationships falter, when all of those things start taking a dive, and eventually they're going to impact the thing you focused on.
Mhm.
They're going to impact work as well.
Totally. And like I think one of the big misconceptions of this before you do it is it feels a lot. Right? Like one of the objections I get, the main objection I get for people not working with me, they're like super interested, but they go, how am I going to put this into my life
Yeah.
already? Right? Like this is
That's already overstuffed.
it's already overstuffed. I'm already overwhelmed. I have no time to do this. But actually, it's not necessarily like in those four aspects of your life, it is about the quality of the time, not necessarily the hours. For most
Mm.
of us, you'll probably spend a lot of your time in work, right? In that Monday to Friday part, even if you're running your own business. But it might mean like in your clarity cap, your emphasis still might be lower than your family time, but you're just really dedicated with your family time, even though it's a
Yeah.
shorter period of time. So like my daughter goes to nursery. Um, Most days, like a few days a week. But I make a conscious choice, a deliberate action to turn my phone off or leave it in a different room from 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock. Right. So that's like quality,
Yeah.
dedicated time with her. Like I'm comfortable with the idea of in the week time, my version of being a deliberate dad, a very good dad to her that I'm happy with, the expectations of myself, are spending that time playing with her, putting her to
Yeah.
bed, bathing her, watching TV, asking her how her day is, all of that stuff. And the weekend's a different thing, right? But like in the weekdays, like I'm totally cool with that. Like I've defined that expectation of what that is.
Yeah.
And again, like, at the minute, I talked about today, a reflection on quarters and months that I do. And like one of the things around my relationship with my wife is minute, like we're accepting of the fact that at this point, yeah, no one probably looks back at the first like having 2 or 3 year olds and go, oh yeah, those were really great years for our marriage. Those were the best years,
Those were the
right?
easiest to navigate.
Those were the easiest ones. Oh yeah, we had so much time and date nights and that. Yeah, no shit, right? But I think again, if like this general idea of balance, if you don't define it by your own expectations, if you don't recognize the season that you're in, you could go, oh, our relationship's really bad at the minute because we haven't been out on date nights and we haven't
Yeah.
done this. Whereas, I've thought we have had a conversation, we have decided that we'll make sure that, every couple of weeks I order in sushi, and even if it's an hour and a half in a week in the
Yeah.
house, like that's our version of time together. Or we've, planned a couple of things. One thing this month, I'm going to Northern Ireland next month, and my parents are looking after the kids, and we're going out. So like, but that's okay. That's
Yeah.
enough. The fact that we don't have every Tuesday date night, like in this season, is fine because we've defined that expectations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas if you don't define the expectations, if you don't define what your success is, if you don't define what deliberate is, your mind will default to something,
Yeah.
right? Societal, something you've seen, something you've read, your mates, your Instagram feed, or something that's already inbuilt in there. Like,
Mm.
and I think like one of the keys to all of this, like living a deliberate life versus default life, is defining what is good, what is bad, what you
Yeah.
want, what is success. Because if you don't, your mind will do it anyway. And guess what? Your mind will normally tell you you're a piece of shit or you're not doing enough,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And kind of understanding the priorities and communicating the priorities. It's a really powerful outlook and really simple from default to deliberate is it makes such a difference. And even then, it's not going to be easy, and you're still going to have big challenges, and there's still going to be days you were saying before we came on where, and actually your post today, I think, is that kind of, that when it gets hard, and it will always get hard from time to time, it is way easier to slip back into semi-default thinking or fully default thinking because you're under pressure, and you're tired, and the discipline required to get up and do the reps and do the reflection and recognize how far you've come is harder to do when you're exhausted. But it's when it is most important, which kind of comes back full circle to the bit where it'd be great if we could do all of this work when from a place of being content because we're not exhausted at that point. But yeah, really, really interesting. I'm conscious of your time, and I've got two more questions for you.
Yeah, go for it.
Given all of that and the fact that the work you do with other people is an extension of essentially the experiment of creating the life you want, what is something you consistently have to find freedom from?
Mm. I think like but the thing that's popping up for me there is that default thinking, right?
Mm.
So that initial thought that pops into your mind that you can't control ultimately.
Yeah.
Like I think one of the reasons why I came up with the term the thought PT, right, is like to really make it all like make a comparison to training your mind versus training your body. But one of the things that I've sort of realized that doesn't it doesn't quite work is you can't control that first thought, right? Like you can't control the things that pop in to your mind,
Yeah.
but you can't control of what you do with them, right?
Yeah.
And one of the I'm a big WWE fan, and back in the '90s, The Rock always when someone was in the ring and they went to talk and they said something, he was like, "It doesn't matter what you think."
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's one thing I think about all the time, right? It doesn't matter what you actually think, right? It matters what action you take off the back of it,
Yeah.
right? So it's like I think like finding consistent freedom from is that initial default thought because it doesn't go away, right? No
Yeah.
matter how much self-development work, no matter how much you think deliberately, yes, in certain scenarios it probably doesn't pop up as much. But though I think like one of the what I find anyway, and one of the common misconceptions is like you can solve your mindset or
Mm.
you can just, completely think in a different way. But that's just not how your mind works, right?
No.
The default mind is there to protect, to keep you alive, to keep you in comfort, right? Like that comfort zone, like
Yeah.
we talked about earlier. It doesn't want
Keep
you
you in the
to
known rather than the unknown.
exactly like it doesn't give a shit about your ambition, your business,
Yeah.
your wanting to live a deliberate life. Doesn't really care about that.
Yeah.
So it's finding freedom from that. And just to go back on our last point, just because I think it makes sense as well, is like you talked about when it's hard, that's the most important part to take those deliberate actions, right?
Mm.
But again, like with this switch from default to deliberate thinking and taking deliberate actions, if you can do that, if you can do those reps when it is okay, right? You can then build up that confidence and trust in yourself to know that
Yeah.
you will continue on that path, even if you have a bad hour, bad day, bad week. You
Yeah.
know that you're going to be able to go back on because you've got all this evidence to suggest that you will.
Mm.
Right. So I think like what I want to get freedom from, like what I've consistently get freedom from is that default thinking. But again, there's the acceptance knowing that that's not going to ever go away.
Yeah. It's really good because it feels like you've got the acceptance that we cannot control what is thrown at us by our mind from its darkest recesses. Everybody's had those moments where a thought comes into your head and you go, "Oh my God, I do hope people can't read my mind. It would be a terrible world if you could see what just came into my head." And the practice is recognizing that you can't do anything about that first thought. You can do something about where that thought takes you to. It doesn't have to be a default second thought. You can step in and I talk about reminding people that our minds are just a tool. I mean, mine happens to sometimes be a massive tool, but it's just a tool. And actually recognizing that we can task it with things, we can interrupt its default, be deliberate with it. So, well, that's not actually very helpful. Let's think about going and spending 20 minutes in the gym. Okay, what am I going to do? Well, I don't really want to do it. No, I understand you don't really want to do it, but we know where we want to go. And in the grand scheme of it's having the discipline to interrupt after that first thought and going, no, 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 no. We're not going on that ride. We're going to divert to a deliberate angle. Yeah, really good, really good.
I think like one of the sorry, I know you want to ask one more question. The That's when the setting your expectations and the reflection part comes in a lot, right?
Yeah,
So if you've defined them, so like a lot of the conversations I have with my clients is we do in a group setting a lot where we talk about a certain aspect, define those expectations, write the things down, and it's there, right? And you go, okay, at 3 a.m. when your baby's crying and I'm questioning the business path that I've been on. Like, do I trust Steve at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday night in this scenario? Or
yeah,
do I trust Steve who was relaxed with his coffee with a group of like-minded guys, like thinking deliberately about like what he wants from his life? Yeah,
yeah,
I trust that guy more than 3 a.m. Steve,
yeah,
obviously, right? So defining those expectations and having that log there of in your mind of what success is or something that you can refer to and look back and go, I know I'm not going down that path. I'm not taking that action. That's shiny
yeah,
object syndrome. I'm not going down there. This is what I actually want.
yeah,
Is super important to have.
yeah. I like that. Which me do I trust more? The me in stress mode or the me in who set the overall agenda and the adventure that I'm on? Yeah,
Exactly.
really good. Okay, so you may well have already answered it, but if you have, then just to kind of soundbite it, the what are you creating freedom to?
I'd actually thought of a different answer to what I'm about to say here. What am I creating freedom to? I think it's do more of what I'm already doing.
Mm,
Right. So almost level everything up a little bit. So, like, I talked again about, defining your own version of success. So, I was having this conversation with my wife around, money. And I really bought into this idea of having a reason, right? Like a proper reason why you want it, not just, oh, yeah, I want that
yeah,
car,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I think for me, it's experiences for me and my family
Hmm.
and freeing up capacity on things that I don't necessarily enjoy, right? So those two things are the things I want to create money and revenue for. And I think both of those things will enable me to do more than I'm doing at the moment of the things that I want to do, right? So it's like, to have better experiences with my children, you know, spend a little bit more time with my friends, create a business that I do more of the things that I love like that. It's almost like the balance. Sorry, I've almost got like a scales in my mind where it's just tipped a slight bit further on to
Yeah,
more enjoyment, more fun, more fulfillment versus necessary tasks. Right. So
yeah.
it's freedom to do more of what I'm already doing. Right. So like level all of those things up.
Brilliant. Love it.
I definitely had a different answer for that before. I can't quite remember what it was neither, but that's just I think through our conversation,
Yeah,
that's what it's like. Definitely, again, it's a good reflection. Like having conversations like this is a good reflection on your
yeah,
own life as well, right?
yeah. Well, I mean
Recognizing
that
it.
to me, what I hear in that is the adventure you are on is absolutely the right one. So that kind of deliberate, intentional, that version of Steve who came up with all of that, that's the one that's trusted. If what you're looking to create is an up leveling of what you already have, brilliant. Absolutely love it.
And
Okay.
sorry, last point
Yeah,
on
yeah,
that. One of the things that um you might have heard of this exercise before, but this idea of like the perfect average Tuesday.
yeah,
So I get my clients to do that as well and go in like minutiae of what an actual average weekday would look like.
yeah,
And I think a lot of the time we then realize that this perfect average Tuesday isn't very far away from what the life you're actually living. It is just that slight up leveling in a lot of tiny tweaks that will
yeah,
actually make a big impact to your life, and a lot of which you can do straight away. Right,
yeah,
a lot of which you can actually do straight away. And yes, of course there is some like aspirational things that will take some reps, will take some deliberate action over a consistent period of time to get to. But actually, for a lot of us, we do have good lives.
yeah,
We do have good lives. We just need to recognize it and reflect on it.
yeah,
And it's okay to, want to do more of the thing that you're doing at the moment. You just need to be really conscious and deliberate with your actions that you're taking to make sure that what you're doing now will get you there.
yeah. It's interesting that whole idea of yes, there are going to be these big ambitions that require more time, and the way to get to those is by these much smaller tweaks, as you say, that create time, create focus, create reward, fulfillment, whatever it might be. That suddenly that big ambitious thing, you're there going, actually, that actually, I'm going to move the goal further because that's definitely attainable now. So let's shoot for something higher, and then we get that. And that used to be what I wanted. That would have been it. And now I feel, yeah, really, really good. Thank you, Steve. Really enjoyed it. Do you want to add anything else before I? Oh, there's one other question
Okay,
actually.
go for it.
Um, I have a vehement uh, anger that builds when I hear people kind of go, "What's one thing people should do?" I hate the question. It's ridiculous. There are millions of things people could do. So, what is something someone can do if they're feeling lost, stuck, in need of more freedom, lack or deep in a default life? What is something someone can do?
I mean, this is probably a cliched answer, but a lot of the times I'm realizing with parenting, the reason why these cliches are there is because they're true. And the reason why these stories are there is because it's true. So, like we talked about tiny tweaks making a big impact. It's taken some action, right?
Yeah,
And like I come up, like you mentioned prime time earlier. I have this idea of prime time, which is dedicated hours for deliberate action, right? Like creating time in your diary to do the actions
yeah,
that you've actually thought about that ladder up to success for you. So if you're feeling like stuck, overwhelmed, feeling low at the moment, one thing you could do is think about something that would give you enjoyment, right? Something that would make your day, make your week a little bit better, and take the action to do that, right? Even if it's super, super small, even if it's, going out for a walk, even if it's ringing a mate, even if it's having a conversation with your mum,
mm,
like all of that, again, like we talked about earlier, it can only take one or two little things to create that momentum, to create
yeah,
that confidence and trust in yourself. And everything, has started with one action. Anything that's ever been created in the world has started with someone thinking about something and someone taking a first step.
yeah,
So taking that first step to create the momentum, taking responsibility ultimately for your own life,
yeah.
and taking that first deliberate action.
Brilliant. And it is that kind of people. Everybody is capable of shifting their life, especially when we're talking about actually to begin with, these are small tweaks. Go for a walk. What's stopping you going for a walk? Really, really love it. Brilliant. I'm
Well,
very conscious of your
it's
time.
all small tweaks though, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah,
Like
it
it's
is.
all small actions. Everything is one small action, even if the outcome is something
Yeah.
reasonably refined. Where you don't need to go into the detail of it, but you decide to have kids. You take one action, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or you decide to get married, you take an action to buy a ring.
Yeah.
Like these little things, like it you handing over your credit card in a shop doesn't marry up to you living a life with a partner for 50 years, right?
Yeah.
Or you
Yeah.
starting a business is you deciding to hand in your notice and it's you
Yeah.
typing up a piece of paper and sending an email.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's all very small. Like everything is very small,
Yeah.
but those are the things that ladder up to be big things, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's you
Definitely.
picking anything to start you
Yeah.
doing that.
Yeah. I saw Michael McIntyre years and years ago being interviewed, and somebody asked him what it was like to be an overnight success. And he said, well, it's taken me 10 years. So yeah, pretty good. And it is that kind of we have all these images of people in success or experiencing success in these very narrow definitions. And it seems like they've done it overnight. And they haven't. It has taken years to establish them to get to where they are. Steve, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. Bring this to a close. There's so much in what you do and your approach, and there are so many tools available for the people you work with. If people are interested in seeing more about you, learning more about you, getting in touch with you, where can they contact you? Where can they find you?
Probably LinkedIn at the minute's the best one. I'm going through a little deliberate dad rebrand, so I don't tell you the email, sorry, the
Yeah,
website, and it won't actually work. So yeah, check me out on LinkedIn, Steve Cardwell, or on Instagram. Actually, it's already changed. So deliberate dad underscore,
brilliant.
and you can find me there. And yes, lots of like free resources and all of that jazz.
Brilliant. Thank you, Steve.
No,
Really
thank you.
appreciate your time. Some really important messages in there and some great advice as well. So thank you so much. Any last words from you?
No, it's been real pleasure. And as I said, like almost having these conversations is a good reflective exercise for me, right?
Yeah.
So
It,
I appreciate you inviting me on. And actually, it's probably an invitation to other people to have conversation with friends, right? As well in
100%.
this type of scenario, like
Yeah.
have your fake podcast because
Yeah,
it
yeah.
actually makes you reflect quite a lot.
Yeah.
Um,
Having a conversation out loud is always more powerful than having a conversation in your head because somebody will pick up on the bits that you haven't picked up on.
Totally. Thank you so
I'm
much.
going to let you go. Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I'd really love to know what you think of these episodes, what you think of the podcast. If there's anybody you think you'd benefit from hearing from, you can get in touch with the show at handsupifyou'rehuman@gmail.com. Please subscribe, please like, please comment, share these with people you think would benefit from them. And I wish you a peaceful and joyful few days, and I will speak to you soon. Take care.